Why the Kuki people seek separate administration, a historical and contemporary examination. For centuries, the Kuki people have lived and defended their ancestral lands across the hill regions of present-day northeast India, northwestern Myanmar, and the Chittagong hill tracts in Bangladesh. Their demand for a separate administration today is not a sudden or politically opportunistic call. It is the culmination of a long and painful history marked by colonial intrusion, ethnic violence, systemic neglect, and most recently, a modern-day genocide that began in 2023. This article traces the historical roots of the Kuki people's assertion of identity and autonomy from their defense of ancestral land as early as 641 CE to the recent calls for a separate administration. More importantly, it explores the intensified need for this demand in light of ongoing violence, displacement, and existential threat post-2023. Ancient roots and early autonomy, since 641 CE, historical and oral traditions trace the presence of the Kukis in the hill regions of what is now northeast India and parts of Southeast Asia back to at least 641 CE. Though not documented in the same way as valley-based kingdoms, Kuki oral history, clan traditions, and settlement patterns demonstrate a long-standing, self-governing society rooted in chieftainship, tribal councils, and customary laws. Their governance structures were based on respect for tribal boundaries, ancestral land inheritance, and clan authority. Unlike the Meetei Kingdom of the Valley, which evolved under Hindu influence, the Kuki people maintained their indigenous identity, independent from the plains. They did not require any approval from valley kings to settle in the hills. Their territory was their homeland by right of ancestral occupation and defense. Resistance against the British, the Anglo-Kuki War, 1917–1919. The arrival of British colonial forces in the late 19th century disrupted the political equilibrium in the hills. The Kuki chiefs resisted British interference, culminating in the Anglo-Kuki War from 1917 to 1919. It was one of the largest tribal uprisings in the region, involving multiple Kuki clans fighting under a coordinated leadership across vast swathes of territory. This war was not a mere protest against taxes or conscription, it was a war for sovereignty. Though eventually suppressed, the Kukis had sent a powerful message. They were not a people to be subdued or absorbed quietly into colonial frameworks. Even the British recognized their resilience, later allowing indirect rule through tribal chiefs and acknowledging the semi-autonomous nature of Kuki regions. Post-independence marginalization and the rise of political assertion, 1960s. After India's independence in 1947, the Hill peoples hoped for a political arrangement that would respect their unique identity. However, the political structures favored dominant communities, particularly in the valley, sidelining tribal representation and development. In 1960, the Kuki National Assembly, KNA, was formed as the first organized political platform for the Kukis. It advocated for a separate state or administrative unit for the Kuki people, fearing both political exclusion and cultural erosion in the Meitei-dominated governance framework. But the Kuki voice was drowned amid the larger, more powerful political narratives of the region. The tragedy of 1993, ethnic cleansing by NSCN-IM. A turning point came in 1993, when the Tangkhul-led NSCN-IM separatist group unleashed a brutal campaign of ethnic cleansing against the Kukis. Over 0 Kukis were massacred, more than 350 villages were burned, and approximately 100 people were displaced. The attack was part of an attempt to establish Nagalim by removing Kukis from areas claimed as Naga homeland. Despite the scale of the atrocities, there was no official recognition of the massacre by the Indian government, no justice for the victims, and no security guarantees for survivors. This betrayal by the state and the silence of the larger society further deepened the Kuki resolve to chart their own political destiny. Rise of armed movements, No, Na, and Nuff, 1988. In the wake of continued marginalization and the horrors of 1993, the Kuki people realized that only organized defense and political assertion could safeguard their community. In 1988, The Kuki National Organization, KNO, was formed along with its military wing, the Kuki National Army, KNA. Simultaneously, the Kuki National Front, KNF, emerged as another prominent armed outfit. These groups aimed not only to protect Kuki territory from aggression, but also to demand the creation of a separate Kuki state within the Indian Union. Their objectives were rooted in the principles of self-governance, tribal integrity, and cultural survival. Unlike secessionist movements, the Kuki armed struggle sought constitutional recognition and peaceful coexistence with India on their own terms. Democratic Mobilization, Kuki State Demand Committee, KSDC, from 2000. To complement the armed movement, a civilian political front, the Kuki State Demand Committee, KSDC, was launched in the early 2000s. It pursued non-violent mass movements, including rallies, economic blockades, and petitions to the central government. The demand was for a Kuki state comprising the hill districts, where the Kuki population formed the majority. Despite several rounds of talks between KNO and the government of India starting in 2008, the process was slow and frequently sidelined in favor of other peace processes, notably the Naga talks. This persistent neglect reinforced a painful truth. The Indian state did not view the Kukis as a priority, even after decades of loyalty, service in the armed forces, and participation in democratic processes. 2023, the start of a genocide. In May 2023, a catastrophic series of events unfolded. Following a controversial High Court recommendation to grant Scheduled Tribe (ST) status to the already dominant Meitei community, tribal communities, including Kukis, protested. What began as a peaceful assertion of constitutional rights quickly spiraled into state-sanctioned ethnic violence. Meitei mobs, reportedly backed by radical outfits such as Arambai Tengo and Meitei Lipun, launched attacks on Kuki settlements across the Imphal Valley. Kukis were dragged out of their homes, shot, mutilated, and their homes torched. More than 200 Kuki civilians were killed, over 300 churches destroyed, and 0 people displaced, forced to take shelter in makeshift camps under dire conditions. Shockingly, the state police was either complicit or inactive. Kuki legislators were sidelined, and central forces failed to protect the victims. The state administration, dominated by Meitei political leaders, appeared more concerned about image management than stopping the bloodshed. This was not a riot. It was a genocidian orchestrated attempt to remove the Kuki people from the Imphal Valley and other mixed regions. Why the Kuki people now demand separate administration? In the wake of the 2023 genocide, the demand for separate administration has intensified, not as an aspiration, but as a necessity for survival. Below are the core reasons. 1. Protection of life and liberty. After witnessing the complete breakdown of law and order, the Kuki people no longer feel safe under the current state administration. They demand a separate administrative structure, be it union territory or statehood, where their security can be guaranteed. 2. Justice for past and present crimes. The atrocities of 1993 were never acknowledged, and now the 2023 genocide continues with impunity. A separate administration would allow the Kukis to initiate judicial proceedings, form investigative bodies, and build legal systems responsive to their experiences. 3. Political empowerment. In the current setup, Kuki representatives are outnumbered and overruled in the state legislature. A separate administration would ensure proportionate representation and autonomy in governance, budgeting, and legislation. 4. Preservation of culture and faith. The burning of churches and desecration of religious sites show how vulnerable the Kuki Christian identity is in the current political landscape. A separate administration would allow for freedom of worship, support for tribal customs, and protection of indigenous festivals and language. 5. Development and economic rights. Despite being rich in natural resources, the Kuki Hill regions remain underdeveloped. A separate administration would allow direct funding, planned development, and tribal-led economic initiatives without interference from a biased central authority in Imphal. 6. Protection of ancestral land. State policies such as the Manipur Land Revenue and Land Reforms Act threaten tribal land ownership. Meitei encroachment and illegal settlement schemes endanger Kuki villages. A new administrative setup would safeguard traditional landholding systems and forest rights. 7. Demographic and ethnic balance. Ethnic violence and manipulative census practices have distorted the demographic realities of the region. A separate Kuki administration would preserve the demographic sanctity of tribal lands and prevent gerrymandering. 8. Moral and legal right to self-determination. As one of the indigenous communities of the region, with centuries of documented and lived history, the Kukis have both a moral and legal right to self-governance. Their consistent call for peace, their participation in the democratic process, and their loyalty to the Indian Union makes their demand constitutionally justifiable. A broader ethnic identity and regional dynamics, the Kukis are not confined to India alone. In Myanmar, the Kuki-Zo people continue to face military oppression, and in Bangladesh, the Kuki-Chin National Front, KNF, has taken up arms against state neglect. The Kuki struggle is thus a transnational indigenous movement for recognition and rights. However, the call in India is clear: a peaceful, democratic, and constitutional solution that grants the Kukis a separate administration within the Indian Union, where they can live in dignity and security. Conclusion: a just and necessary demand. The Kuki demand for a separate administration is not born from ethnic pride or territorial ambition. It is born from trauma, survival instinct, and historical truth. For centuries, the Kukis have defended their land, fought off colonizers, survived massacres, and tried to coexist with others. But coexistence has now become a death sentence. It is time for the government of India to listen not just to the cries of the displaced or the petitions of the political class, but to the soul of a people who have suffered too long. Separate administration is not division. It is justice, it is dignity, it is survival. Published by Zalengam Media, the content represents indigenous historical perspectives and community voices. We stand for justice, truth, and tribal rights.